All right, so what do we think the next 4 years for PlayStation will look like? This is, I think, a fair question and probably a pretty common one right now that people are asking. You know, we're halfway through the gen of the PS5, and we have a lot of games where we don't really know when they're going to land. We have a lot of studios, and we don't really know what they're working on. But I actually think we have good information about what the cadence of games will look like for the next 4 years. We've got some insiders recently sort of speaking out, some journalists on some of the projects and their timing. We even have an image from one of the earnings reports that I think kind of gives a clue as to how they're thinking about things, even with something that Herman Hulst said recently and how they sort of view games. I also think they have a secret weapon that hasn't really made landfall yet, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment because I do think they have thought rather broadly about how to grow the PlayStation platform, and it reaches beyond just sort of the traditional, well, we're going to do single player, and now we're going to do live service. I think some of the other things they're leaning into will really pay off well, and that'll also just add more games for us to play. Now, if at any point during this video you like what you hear, make sure you hit like and subscribe. I've been trying to do the uploads more like the live streams, just sort of like a discussion and a conversation. So if you want to be here for those debates, make sure you're subbed to the channel. So let's just start with what has been said, and I think we have to take sort of a multifaceted approach here. So one of the big questions about the games coming out is, are they coming out soon, next year? You know, you got Wolverine, big question mark. You got Intergalactic. Many of us assumed it was coming out in 2026. But Jason Schreier said from everything he knows, and he's very reliable with insider information and having contacts at the studios and such, he said, no way that thing's coming out before 2027. Now, there was a recent leak that it was like targeting late 2026. That's been sort of shot down. It seemed as though the leak was essentially doing what commonly people do, is they take all the available information and they just sort of act as if they've seen the game, and they just kind of confirm things we already know. There was also recently Mag, middle-aged gamer guy, he did a video saying that Venom will be arriving late 2026 and then Wolverine will be 2027. Now, if that's true, and we think about sort of the timing here, that's a little bit further out than I was expecting. I thought Venom was going to be sort of a surprise late this year in 2025, and then we'd see Wolvie show up in 2026. But Mag also has been very reliable with sort of how he couches things. Then there's this earnings call image that I saw where it sort of showed right now, and it had Yote and Death Stranding 2, which are kind of their two big titles this year. And that really coincides with what Herman Hulst said when he was sort of asked about the first party portfolio. In sort of a back and forth, he said that Death Stranding 2 and Yote were the next big first party titles coming out. And many people, I pointed out at the time, well, that means they consider something that if they're publishing it, they consider it first party, because they obviously don't own Kojima Productions and they don't own Death Stranding, and yet they're viewing that as a first party effort. Now, he didn't include Lost Soul Aside, which is a publishing effort, but I think he didn't include that because they were specifically talking about the PlayStation. And Lost Soul Aside is different in that China Hero is PC and PlayStation day and date. Now, I'm going to talk more about the China Hero project in a little bit. There's a lot of games that probably should be on your radar, and they're looking really good, but not a lot of people know about them because you have to go to the China Hero Project website, and the trailers are a little obscure. And what I think that earnings call image does, though, is it also emphasizes what's coming next. They have Intergalactic sitting there, and they have Wolverine sitting there. And I think this is important because when you look at this earnings call image, what you're dealing with, I think, is you're dealing with sort of this idea that they have this two-game philosophy going forward. At least that's what it seems like to me. You're going to get roughly two of their studios or two of their pointed publishing efforts every year. But since we heard that Intergalactic is not in 2026, and then we also just heard that Wolverine is not in 2026, I think we can now kind of predict when games are coming out and what games specifically. So if you just consider the cadence right now, let's just talk about that. So I think it's roughly 2 to 3 first-party games a year. That's their goal. We know Xbox was very forthright with saying they wanted one good game, one big game at quality every quarter. That's roughly 4 games a year. That has been really difficult for them to hit. They haven't really done that consistently at all. So I think 2 to 3 is maybe more reasonable. Probably the biggest year in the PlayStation 5 gen was 3. It was Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, and God of War Ragnarok, kind of all in the same year. I mean, that's not going to be typical, but I actually think some of the years upcoming are going to be pretty big. So if we just look at 2025, it's Ghost of Yotei, Death Stranding 2, and Lost Soul Aside. That's 3. Now, they're all in different camps. Yotei is a first-party studio. Death Stranding 2 is published by PlayStation, but they don't own the studio or the game. And then Lost Soul Aside is a China Hero project. Again, they don't own the IP or the studio, but they're publishing the game. It'll also be on the PlayStation and PC day and date. So it's a very multifaceted approach to the year. I think next year, 2026, we're seeing Saros. We're seeing Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, and then Venom, according to the most recent leak. That, again, is 2 to 3, but they're all in very different camps. You've got Venom, that's pretty big, that's Marvel, that's Insomniac. Even if it's smaller like Miles Morales, that'll be a big game, that'll be a big mover. And then Saros, first-party studio, but probably a smaller game because Returnal is great. It's one of my all-time favorite games, but that's not exactly the kind of game that you would think is like this giant narrative-driven tentpole, but it is a first-party studio. Then Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, again, we're in different territory now. That's probably considered a live service game by PlayStation. It's not their studio, and it's not their property. That's 2026. Now, according to what we're hearing, 2027 would then be Intergalactic and Wolverine. That's 2 pretty big titles. That's Naughty Dog and Insomniac. That's 2 brand new games, 2 brand new franchises from those studios. I would hazard a guess there would probably be a 3rd game that year. We're going to get to that in a moment because there are all the China Hero project games, Mina Hero, India Hero. There's also all the live service games that are sort of hanging in the air that we don't know about. What I think this would mean then is if the recent rumors are true that the PlayStation 6 is more likely landing in 2029, which I have said for a long time, I thought they were going to extend this generation. Even Cerny had recent remarks about multiple years going forward. It's almost like he's thinking that the PlayStation 6 is not around the corner. It's not like 2 years away or 3 years away. 2028 as a late arrival, 2029 is what many people are now speculating. Well, that would mean 2028 is going to be that awkward year where if you have a bunch of titles hit in that year, they're sort of landing just before the new gen starts. That happened with The Last of Us Part 2. That happened with Ghost of Tsushima. You have these games land very, very late, and they seem almost before their time, and they land just before the new gen starts. I think 2028 would likely be when Cory Barlog's sci-fi game finally shows up, and the Horizon Zero Dawn online game. Not the MMO, but the one that Guerrilla's actually working on that's supposedly going to be like a Monhun-style game in the Horizon universe. Now, the reason I think these 2 games would be perfect for that year in particular is it sort of frees up the next big God of War and the next mainline Horizon game to be PlayStation 6 launch titles. So that would mean that 2029 is then the PlayStation 6 launch year. That's at least what I think. I'm just kind of theorizing here, timing. Even if it's late 2028, I would imagine the 3 big dogs would show off to kick off the PlayStation 6. And those are Spider-Man 3, the next mainline God of War, and the next mainline Horizon game. That's a pretty big start to any gen. But if you think about the timing of when Spider-Man 2, Ragnarok, and Forbidden West all came out, that really does track. I mean, that's a lot of years in between, and we know sequels tend to come out at a faster cadence anyway. But my gut instinct is they would want to hold those big 3, especially if the entire way there, every year we're getting 2 to 3 really good publishing efforts from PlayStation, whether it's Saros or Venom or Marvel Tokone or Intergalactic or Wolverine or Barlog sci-fi game or this online Horizon game. I think all of those are going to be considered, I think, good publishing efforts from the studios. You can't, I don't think, look at PlayStation's publishing efforts and only fixate on the first-party studios because they're spending their publishing dollars in a variety of ways. They're also navigating a lot of things that are coming. So let me just talk about why I think this cadence is good, why I'm not upset about this. I am going to acknowledge the disappointment that people are going to feel from me saying this. If they're like, well, if this is accurate, I feel like that's disappointing. I'm going to acknowledge that in a minute. Let's just talk about why this is good. First and foremost, 2026 is going to have GTA 6 in it. And everybody has to sort of navigate around that. We saw that this year. Nobody would pick a release date after like August, maybe September. Nobody would say anything. Now all these games are trying to shift around. It's almost like I would not be surprised at all if we go to like Gamescom and there's a bunch of new release dates and things that are starting to like slam themselves into the end of 2025. And the reason for that is it's now empty, right? We don't have the big GTA 6 landing. So that is something that has to be navigated by PlayStation, being that they're going to be the largest platform for that game. They have the most consoles in circulation. They have a good relationship with the company. It stands to reason that GTA 6 is going to be enormous for PlayStation. I think they've even acknowledged this in like earnings calls. Like they're going to see an uptick in console sales. They've got a lot of people, like 60 million, who haven't switched over from PS4. And this is going to be one of those games that gets a lot of people to do it. That might make sense as to why, when you look at 2026, Soros and Venom feel like smaller games. Well, it might make sense to have some of your smaller games hit during 2026 because you're not really wanting to put any of your big mainline titles in the same calendar year as GTA 6. I mean, I don't think PlayStation navigated all of this from that far out, but if they have things they can kind of shift and move, whether it's Wolverine or Intergalactic, and they can bump it by one more year, if they can do that and still reap the benefits of GTA 6, I believe they would do that. Now, the other thing to consider here is third party is also starting to heat up. I feel like every time we turn around, we've got trailers for games. Like people are getting better with the Unreal Engine. And when we enter the second half of a gen, that's when big games start landing. That's when big hits start landing. So they have to navigate that as well. They can't just like stomp all over their third party partners and the relationships that they have with them. They're wanting these studios and these publishers to leverage the PS5 Pro, to get familiar with PSSR. That's another factor here. We're hearing that PSSR is going to implement the same algorithm from FSR4, which has been enormously praised, and that's a great benefit to the AMD relationship between AMD and Sony. Well, if they want that to be something that third-party studios are leveraging, well, you can't just stomp on all of the calendar year and just overwhelm it. You space things out, which I think PlayStation has shown they are very comfortable with spacing things out. There's also the element of Xbox here. Xbox is now publishing all of their games seemingly going forward day and date on PlayStation if it can be done. In the wake of the layoffs, we're hearing that anything that's in the pipeline, they want to have it ready, they want to have it coming out, and there's a ton of leaks saying games are being pushed to land on PlayStation as well because they know there's money to be made there. Well, that's just more property coming over to PlayStation that wasn't coming previously. Gears of War E-Day, for example, coming in 2026. Well, historically speaking, I don't think anybody anticipated that happening. That means you got to have space on the calendar for that. You want it to do well. You want it to sell well. You don't want to stomp on games that you know could potentially sell well and do well for your platform. You get a nice 30% scrape on that, and you didn't have to market it. You didn't have to develop it. So I think that's why this is good. It lets the calendar breathe. I mean, 2025 is already insane. Many of us have already spoken about this. Our backlogs are filling up. Just recently, I had people leaving comments about how they're having to really budget and choose which games they want to buy. That's a good thing. That really puts power in the hands of the players, since currently we can't get refunds on digital purchases, which I argue in another video we should be able to do. But one of the best things about the calendar being really full, as well as somewhat spaced out and spread out, you can really sit in a game and enjoy it. And then when something new comes out, there's no pressure to buy it right away. You can wait for reviews. You can wait for streamers to play it and really see what the user scores are. And then you're more empowered as a consumer to make those choices. But I want to talk about why I get that it's disappointing, okay? It feels very spread out. At the beginning of a gen, everybody's very excited, and some of these studios have become almost like celebrities within the fandom, like people that really love PlayStation. They want something from Naughty Dog. And it doesn't matter that they released a game of the year in 2020, right before this gen started. Everyone forgets that. It's very easy to forget that. I had people, it was like 2022, maybe 2023, and people were like, where's Naughty Dog's next game? I'm like, it's been 2 or 3 years. They just delivered a Game of the Year winner. And I've watched a handful of videos recently that really tracked their history with all the Uncharted games, with The Last of Us, and why that's a company that you should just trust to take their time and deliver greatness. You also don't know what's going on with Bluepoint and Bend because they had significant setbacks, wasting their time on live service. Naughty Dog wasted their own time as well. So it's perfectly reasonable to be disappointed. We also had that Wolverine trailer very early in like 2021. That seemed really early in the gen. It was coupled with Spider-Man, but still, that is something that I think is reasonable to say. Like, man, you guys had us all hyped up. Some of these studios are absolutely loved, and they've been very quiet. They've been very absent. But if the games come out and they're at better quality, and while you're waiting on them, there's a ton of other things happening, I think that's the best case scenario. We've seen what has happened with games that come out too early. This is a common complaint in gaming. Just recently, I made this observation about Ghost of Yotei. If you watch the 20-minute deep dive, something comes through very loud and very clear. Sucker Punch is passionate about that game. They're including Japanese directors, musicians, all this stuff to make the game just sort of ooze with Japanese culture. And that comes from a place of passion. In the wake of Expedition 33, that's a commonly used word now, is let developers cook, let developers use their passion or make things they're passionate about. Well, if you let studios take their time and really make excellent games, you're probably going to see more evidences of passion, as opposed to, well, we just have to hit this schedule, we just have to get games out. Now, in the realm of getting games out, there are two other things we need to talk about. Number one, live service, and number two, what I feel is the secret weapon that hasn't really made landfall. But let's just first talk about live service. And I know you're like, I don't want to talk about live service. I'm going to skip ahead. People hate live service. Hang on just a minute. I want to push back on this so much lately because people are being so extreme that they're like, well, PlayStation should just abandon their live service efforts. Well, that's very, very, I think, rash to say because Helldivers 2 is being enjoyed by tons of people. Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls has the fighting game community just chomping at the bit, thrilled, elated, like the announcement set that world on fire. I could feel the heat from that community. I'm not even a part of it. That's a good thing. There are going to be people very happy that that relationship is there. And here's the thing. Helldivers 2 and Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, that's the way to do it going forward. My hope, I've been very critical of PlayStation for this, having single-player studios just sort of take a crack at live service was an enormous mistake. It's a good thing they pulled the ripcord on Bend and Bluepoint because they were going to waste even more time and more production dollars and potentially put the studios in jeopardy because those games were likely not to land. If Bungie has proven anything, it's that even a studio that's been doing it for 10 years can suddenly get a lot of things wrong or can suddenly just lose their audience. There is a graveyard of failed live service games. The last thing PlayStation should have ever done, acknowledging they needed help because they get Bungie, they should have never greenlit any projects until they had that help. That was absolutely short-sighted and foolhardy, and it damaged their calendar. I think it damaged those studios. I really do. So I think going forward, that's the model. Grab someone like Arrowhead, grab someone like Arc, who has a history of making those games. Let them build it. They're the experts. And then you publish it. And if it doesn't do well, at least you didn't take one of your very valuable studios and waste their time. So hopefully the live service games going forward, which I think there's one in the thing that I'm about to talk about next. And that's the secret weapon. I think PlayStation's secret weapon that has not really made landfall, it hasn't really pushed anything major out, is their hero projects, specifically China. This market is enormous. We saw what happened with Black Myth Wukong. We've seen what has happened with other reports coming out about just how much people want to break into the Chinese market. Shuhei Yoshida recently spoke about this in an interview, saying that market has virtually no console footprint, and that's why the China Hero Project is trying to get in there, working with existing Chinese developers, shipping games both on PC and the console to attempt to crack in. And if they pull this off, it will be huge for the PlayStation growth of the console, which is good for everybody involved. It's good for all the studios involved. It's good for the consumers to have more of these things in production and coming out, because that lends to more investment. That lends to more games. It's like, well, we're getting more customers. We're growing. You'll see more games come. Now, the thing is, some of these China Hero projects look insanely good. Okay, I'm just going to run through these very, very quickly. Convaleria, a third-person action shooter. It's also a multiplayer game. This could be sort of two birds with one stone. Getting a big, successful live service game in China would be transformational for their live service efforts. It also looks like a good game. The next one I want to talk about, Daba, Land of Waterscar. This is a very Elden Ring inspired, very Souls-like game. It's described as, quote, a beautiful Souls-like action adventure that tells the story of a puppet with a humanoid appearance exploring the ancient city of Guj during an imminent apocalypse. Now listen, if you look at this thing, you can tell this could strike a chord with the Souls-like fans out there. It just has that feel and that vibe. The next game I want to show you is called Exilage. This is like Outriders meets Final Fantasy 16. It's described as a high-speed, third-person shooting game. Many people have said, where are the shooting games? Why aren't we getting shooting games from PlayStation? Well, two of the China Hero projects are really cool-looking shooting games. I mean, this one has like larger-than-life boss fights, very reminiscent of the icon fights from Final Fantasy 16, but it also has this sort of frenetic moment-to-moment fights, very reminiscent of Outriders. And say what you want about Outriders, it had some really fun elements to those moment-to-moment fights. The next game is called Brocade Clad Guard. Now, it's a Wuxia-themed action RPG during the Ming Dynasty. If I'm saying Wuxia wrong, sorry. This I had to look up. This is a genre of Chinese fiction focused on martial artists with extraordinary abilities and chivalrous ideas, often set in historical or fantastical China. So we're going to the Ming Dynasty, and if you look at this thing, it could very much land like Black Myth Wukong did and have a very strong support base in China, but as well as just globally fans that are now drawn to these types of games. Now, lastly, I got to show this one because we're all going to think the same thing when we see it. This one's called Unending Dawn. This is sort of like Stellar Blade meets First Berserker Kazan. Now, the anime stylization and the fast, very frenetic, very quick, challenging combat. Now, this is a combination that I just think has a high chance of being very popular. Now, think about this with me. Any of these titles could show up over the next 4 years, just adding to the calendar of already great games that we know are coming, or I would say promising games. So maybe you're getting Saros and Venom, and maybe one of these really cool games land. Maybe in the year where you're getting Intergalactic and Wolverine, you get one of these really cool games to land. Just like this year, where we have Yote, Death Stranding 2, and Lost Soul Aside. That game hasn't even come out yet. We don't know what kind of a hit it's going to be. But there's also the India Hero Project and the Mina Hero Project. I think these are sort of like secret weapons because you're going to enable a platform to crack into a market that up to now, these have been very difficult for some of these consoles to get into. And we benefit from these investments. These publishing efforts just add more games to the calendar. So, conclusion here to me is very simple. The next 4 years look great. It's full of first-party, second-party, exclusives, brand new IPs, big third-party games. The publishing efforts from PlayStation are diverse, and yes, part of that diversity is going to be some live service games that maybe don't go anywhere. But the vast majority of the things that I listed today, these all look great. They look promising. They look far more in the vein of what new and long-standing PlayStation fans want. So, as far as I can tell, the next 4 years look bright. As long as you accept the fact that you're not going to be getting like a huge first-party PlayStation Studio game every 3 or 4 months. They're going to space them out. They're going to ship at a very high quality. They're going to ship feature complete, which is what gamers have been asking for a very long time. And interspersed through all out of that might be games you didn't even hear about until you watch this video. So I hope you made it this far because I think there's good things coming. I think a lot of the forced negativity just in the wake of the Ghost of Yote deep dive, I just don't really think it has any legs. If you look at the way people are responding and you look at the like ratios of these trailers and the comments, most gamers are excited. And that means I'm excited because these games are flooding my backlog. I can't even keep up. And I think that's a great place to be. We're no longer really in a desert. We're in more of a deluge. And I think that shows a lot of promise for the future. So if you don't agree, or maybe you didn't hear about some of these games, man, leave a comment below. I try to interact with them as much as I can. Make sure you hit subscribe, like button, and all that. That way, you're here for the talk shows, and I'll see you in the next video.